I'm going to turn off my WhatsApp so it doesn't click. So, okay. We're recording. People are joining. Let's give them a minute. Okay, got a good amount of people in. And yep, we're live. Got a cat problem. Okay, so let's go. Let's go and start. Looks like we have enough people. So welcome. Thank you for joining, everyone. We're glad everybody could be here. Today marks 1 month since the February 6 earthquakes, and we extend our condolences to all those who were impacted. Even though it's 1 month ago, it still feels like it's today for many people that went to the area or lived through some of the aftermath of the earthquake. There's still tremors on a daily basis. Ingrid and I returned today from the earthquake zone. We're in Istanbul, and yeah, obviously the rhetoric in Turkey has moved on with the political discussions and the opposition parties, and we'll get to those. But for many people, the earthquake is priority number one, and how to deal with the aftermath of that, and also just the loss and the pain continues. So we're going to cover the earthquake first, and then we'll move on to politics, but we will mix the two often because both of them are deeply political subjects. Why so many buildings fell, for example, and construction booms and the death toll. So we'll try to cover as much as we can between an hour, hour and a half. Let's just start with the fact, to give a little background on people who don't know what Turkey Recap is. We're a newsletter, we're independent, and I wanted to clarify that we don't get funding from organizations or parties. So all our funding comes from readers at the moment. No reader contributes more than $20 a month. So we don't have a huge sway on anything we do. We are completely independent journalists publishing news with the goal of informing people on what's going on in Turkey. And all funds that we receive go to that cause. And we're very proud of what we do. And I'm glad to be putting on a webinar like this. If it goes well, we'll do more. I'd be glad to. To just summarize the situation of where we are 1 month after the earthquakes, we have an official death toll of 45,000 in Turkey alone. This is we have more than 45,000. It continues to rise. We have 1.5 million people displaced. We have more than 200,000 buildings collapsed or heavily damaged. Many people are living in camps, and others have left the earthquake region. I was personally down there with Ingrid, as I mentioned, over the weekend. We visited several camps, including in Woudwijk and Islahiye. Both towns were leveled, medium-sized, small towns. They have now container camps on the outskirts of those towns. And there were huge concerns about the hygiene situation when we first went down and in the immediate aftermath of the earthquakes. What we saw was a good amount of bathrooms, a good amount of showers in these camps. They're still fixing up these container camps. They look very similar to camps that I saw on the Greek islands for refugees, migrants, except these were set up in less than a month. So there's incredible progress. They're impressive to see, but there are some problems. For example, Nurday smelled like sewage. There's obviously a drainage problem. And in Islahiye, I witnessed some workers fixing a broken pipe, sewage pipe. So obviously they were built fast. There's going to be problems, but the situation's improving. It's very impressive. I would expect these camps to be in a lot of news coverage, especially in pro-government media. We saw a lot of extra things for the children in these camps. There are many children in these camps. There's playgrounds, there's horse rides, petting zoos, there's a technology tent. There's just all sorts of flashy things that look good for photos. And yes, some camps are going to be very impressive and well managed, but how many people live in those camps? And what about the others that are not in the camps? These are questions that I would raise and advise people to watch for in the future. In the cities that we went to, Gaziantep and Antakya, and different smaller cities in those regions, over this weekend, I just saw many people still living in informal encampments inside the cities, outside the cities. Many of these people were there to basically, it was a mix of reasons. Some of them were waiting to get their belongings out of their collapsed homes. Some of them were still waiting to recover loved ones. And some of them did not have other places to go. In Antakya, many of the people that were still in tent encampments in the city, they seemed to be Arabic speakers of Turkish nationality and Syrian nationality. It was a big mix of people. There was also a Roma community among them. Police officers also confirmed that it was a lot of Syrians and Turkish citizens of different minority groups. And from my personal observations and chats with these people, it did seem like many non-Turkish speaking Turkish citizens. So make of that what you will. This was the situation in Antakya. To wrap up on the current situation, rubble, there's a lot of rubble everywhere in the cities. There was gigantic piles of rubble amassing outside some of these cities. I saw one in Samandağ. It looked like, just a small mountain of concrete rubble next to the sea. Whether that's a temporary or permanent location for the rubble, we'll see. There's many concerns about asbestos and other contaminants leaking into water beds in the places where these rubble piles are being placed, but obviously it's a difficult situation. What do you do with this amount of destroyed building matter? And while a lot of rubble is in the cities, there's also specific sites that have been cleared. One of them that we noticed over the weekend was the Renaissance Residence, the huge luxury building in Antakya, completely cleared out that site, while other sites remain untouched. So there's a lot of variation in the cleanup effort, and you can draw your own conclusions based on whatever happens next, because right now we just know what we see. I don't know how to assess it completely, because it is a huge disaster and you can put blame and come to assumptions, but it is just hard to describe. I think the fact that one photo doesn't capture an entire city's destruction should tell you that it's, unmeasurable, let's say. And finally, I'll just end with saying there's been a state of emergency imposed in the earthquake regions, and we saw a decree giving the government pretty much more power to speed up reconstruction by removing obstacles on where or how to rebuild. So we'll have to follow that in the coming months, the reconstruction efforts and how this impacts people and public land. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Ingrid, who also just returned from the earthquake region.
I was on mute. Hello, everyone. Indeed, I just returned today after spending about a week in the earthquake zone, and like the first 2 weeks, just right after the earthquakes happened, I was also traveling around, going to various places. So for me, it was also interesting to see, I mean, these first 2 weeks, there was so much grief, there was so much also anger, also despair. This time it seemed a little bit not so on the outside. Many people have left. Many people are in camps. They are not staying close to the rubble anymore, waiting for family members. But what really struck me is I spent 2 days and 2 nights with the volunteer effort in the church or next to the church in Samanda. So during the day I went out for interviews, but then I stayed there in the evening and in the night. And during the day, actually, it was a really special atmosphere. People were trying to make the best of it. There were volunteers from different parts in Turkey, also from all kinds of backgrounds. I mean, the church was a Greek Orthodox church. The papas, I think, priest was staying there as well. But I mean, there were people from everywhere, not only Greek Orthodox, but local Arab-speaking Alawis, Turks from everywhere. And during the day, there was like a really warmth. Everyone was supporting each other. People made jokes, they talk about random things. But then during the night, I slept with two earthquake survivors in a tent. We all both had our own section. But then you see that during the night, they can't sleep at night. There are still earthquakes happening, maybe every night, maybe every other night. So they just can't sleep. They keep reliving the trauma that they lived through many times, because there were 2 earthquakes on the same day, but then there was the third one 1 week after, I think, and that especially hit Samanda very hard, and that made it it was just another addition to the trauma they already had. So I think maybe from the outside look, as people are trying to, they're not going back to normal life, but it might seem like things are getting a bit better. But as you spend more time with them, you also see some send their children away, especially what I see, especially older people are staying because either they have spent their whole lives there, so they can't just move easily to somewhere else. They don't want to. They have everything there. Why would they give it all up for something in a town where they don't know anyone, where they don't have their own kind of habits? So that was one thing. And the other thing was also that they were worried that how the volunteer efforts would continue, because all the chefs, they were volunteers, but some of them had to go back to work, or they were expected to return back to their hometowns, or they had other things that they couldn't leave behind, or they just have to earn money because the rents continue, the expenses continue, and especially in the current economic situation, not everyone has the economic freedom to just leave their jobs and go somewhere else. So that's also something that really struck me this time, is that they were worried if the people kept coming also after a month, because the last month it was on everyone's mind and every day, but that will maybe gradually, and also with the current political economic situation, take over the news, take over the the main team in the country. So that was something that they would. I mean, the sustainability of certain volunteer aid efforts was another point that really struck me this visit.
Thank you. Gonca?
Hello, everyone. I arrived to the disaster zone on the first day of the earthquake to Adana, and then in the 20th day of the earthquakes, I returned to Istanbul. I'm also currently in Istanbul right now, at least more than a week. The thing actually struck me when I was returned was seeing how people are talking about being normal again. And I know that especially during the last week of my stay in the disaster zone, a lot of people were actually worried about me and the trauma which will the consequence about the trauma that will come with the things that we see and we experience. But after returning Istanbul, I think I realized that even though how much we try to reflect the scale of what happened and the possible ongoing impacts of it, it's not easy to deliver all of the reality to people back in home. So a friend visited actually last week, and I took her to Victoria's Secret, and seeing big milletimizin yanındayız sign in a fancy mall in Victoria's Secret, it's not a normal thing basically. So but we will keep trying to tell the stories from the region, what happened and what should happen. So we will keep trying. And this webinar is also a part of that, trying efforts. So welcome everyone. I hope we can give you at least some questions about your answers. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. And Selim?
Hello. Okay. So everybody, okay. So I'm not in the earthquake zone. I'm in Gonca, and I've been what happened basically in the last 3 days was that when people here always talk about politics, and even during the earthquake, people always in this town, it's always the political angle. And well, what happened was on Friday, the table of six gathered, right? And Meral Akşener, the nationalist part of the table of six, basically stormed out, saying that, and she had this big dramatic speech about how she claimed the table of six no longer represented the popular will, the people's will, and which created this huge chaos all of a sudden across really across the country. I mean, that's all that anybody could talk about in these last 3 days, which meant that people didn't talk about the earthquake really. It's quite upsetting to a lot of people, I know. Well, what happens, I think, with the opposition, what's been happening actually for the last few years, is that the opposition goes through these cycles of optimism and extreme pessimism. And in the last few years, I thought that there were some sort of roughly a quarterly cycle where for a few months people were very optimistic about change in the country and within the opposition, and for a few months they were very pessimistic, and that would depend on the Imamoglu conviction or different kinds of things. And I think those cycles are narrowing now. So we go through periods of optimism and pessimism much more quickly within a span of a few weeks or now a few days. What happened was on Friday, the table of six dissolved, and a lot of people got very, very upset very quickly. And when you went on TV, intra-opposition rivalry started. People were quite mean to each other for a few days, WhatsApp channels went haywire and things like that. And I have my theories on the reasons for why that happened on Friday. We can go into that, I think, in the as we have more time in the next like half an hour or an hour. But what happened today, as I was talking to different people in town, was that we got news that İYİ Party has returned to the table of six, and there were some, they made an arrangement so that the two mayors for Istanbul and Ankara are now going to be sort of VP candidates. The talk is of a sort of American style VP candidacy, where it won't just be Kılıçdaroğlu as the presidential candidate. It'll be Kılıçdaroğlu flanked by two VP candidates, and they'll be the two mayors. That's the sort of idea that's being floated out now, and the table of six, I think, as we're speaking, they are speaking, and they're expected to come out and announce that they've sort of made a decision to stick together after all. And now there's this incredible positive mood all of a sudden, this explosion of positivity, and that the country is going to change. So again, these cycles are continuing. I think, yeah, that's it for me for now.
Yeah, thank you for all those. Definitely, we scheduled this webinar expecting to talk about the anniversary of the earthquake, but since Thursday, I don't know how many days of political crisis we've lived through in Turkey. Basically, politics has hijacked our initial objective with this webinar, but happy to cover all topics and any updates that we get while we're speaking, because we don't know when an announcement might come. And yeah, this is what it means to be in Turkey and follow Turkish politics. So on that note, let's take it to the questions. We have a lot of people asking about the death toll and the accuracy of the numbers. There's many doubts, there's speculation. It's hard to confirm anything, obviously, because there's still rubble. Walking over the rubble in Antakya, in Samanda, just yesterday, there's the smell of death, less than before, but there's the smell of death. It's there. And based on the government's track record with COVID and the numbers there and the admission that there was some undercounting, people have suspicions. Is there anything that we can say about the accuracy of the death toll that the Turkish government is putting out, which is more than 45,000 right now?
Actually, like just before we started, Erdogan announced a new number, and it's now 46,104 people, like the death toll. But if we check the recent numbers, because we don't have we don't have a place that we can check hourly numbers or anything else still, like after 1 month. If we follow the announcements coming from the government officials, and this is also what the government tells to journalists when we ask about the official death toll, actually, they say like, follow the president's announcements and ministry's announcements. So when we do that, we can see that between like 1st day of March and the 5th day of March, actually, like Afat announced a number, and then Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu announced another number. And it means that like the number of death only increased by 900 in 5 days. But if we think about people still looking for their loved ones, they cannot locate their bodies or whereabouts. And there are, as you said it, there are still rubble, and we know that there are still bodies under those. So it means like when we think that at least 3 cities in the region is completely destroyed, and a total like 10 cities affected from the situation, it doesn't add up that the death toll only increases 200 in a day, basically. Like we cannot tell like this is not 46,000 or that. In my personal opinion, it's like impossible to do. And we know some speculative numbers are like going around about the numbers, but like I believe, yes, the real death toll is way like more than the one that we are getting from the officials right now.
And if I just add to that, I also asked this in Antakya people, like, what do you think about the death toll? I mean, I think the latest number I saw from Hatay mayor was 20,000 in the region. But there are few, you know, maybe you know Kurtuluş Caddesi, it's like one of the oldest streets in Antakya, and there were still very few people there, but I mean there were some people there. So I also asked them about like, how do you see it? I mean, and they were also like, we saw from this building, we saw 13 bodies being pulled out. From that building, we saw 4 people being still under the rubble and not taken out. We know that. I mean, there's other buildings. We know there's like 3, 4, 5 people taken out. And if you, I mean, and it's such a small area, and there's like certain parts in the old town, I think that there are still the roads are blocked by complete rubble. So I think also in the area there's a they don't think that this is the real number. Also, there's no number of missing people. We know from reports, but also from you know, it's really sad to see those messages on like printed papers. We are missing this person, but also way more on social media. You still see. I still see daily. People are still looking for many people. And that's also, there's no number still, so that makes also fuels the suspicion that the current number is, I mean, not still it will be higher.
Did you want to add anything, Selim?
Me right now, no. I think I'll cover the political angle, I think, in a bit.
Save your energy. We might have some needed spot analysis soon. Moving on with specific earthquake questions, there were a lot of claims and suspicions about bias and relief and aid distribution, especially on social media. Some news claiming that Syrians or Kurds or other minority groups, non-Muslims in Turkey, did not receive the same treatment because of their backgrounds. So because of these claims, I think it's important to address them, since it's a topic of discussion, and we should talk about it if other people are talking about it. So was there any evidence to support these claims that anybody saw in the field? Me personally, I did not see this evidence.
I can continue. I read a report today, several NGOs who did a big tour in the region after the first week of the earthquake, and they reported actually several incidents of discrimination against non-Sunni religious groups and also non-Turkish groups. In terms of discrimination against Syrians, yes, I have witnessed several situations that the Syrian families around the area were scared to ask for help to anyone because they were basically in fear of their security or any possible reaction from the other groups. But in terms of discrimination against the non-Sunni groups, I heard several stories from the Alevis, especially the Alevis in Hatay, that they didn't receive the needed help just because of their religious differences. But I didn't witness any incident basically just directly.
No, if I can just quickly add to that, I also went to Samanla, which is like majority Arab Alawi city, also with JHP mayor. And I mean, I also personally haven't seen anything, but it's a real, what I mean, people are experiencing it in that way, that they don't get the help because of their, I mean, they are not Sunni, they are like an Arab speaking. And also I went to at the seaside you had the camp of TIP, the Turkish Workers' Party, and I also asked them about this, and they also there were also some other organizations that came there, especially because they believed that if they wouldn't be there, there would not be any other help. And they also claimed that, I mean, their trucks were confiscated, and I mean the goods that they were shipping were put into Afad depot there. I mean, it's really difficult to check those claims, but it's a really strong I mean, people are really strongly convinced that, I mean, their background, their religion, their ethnicity is actually a reason for discrimination in terms of humanitarian help.
We got a question on the border with Syria and the situation there, about the humanitarian corridor. I visited the border in Kilis. It was fairly slow traffic. This was about a week and a half after the earthquake. And there was really just 2 humanitarian aid guys. They flew in from London, and they were carrying stuff on their back. Just some hydraulic jacks to lift up concrete slabs that had fallen. They said the most basic stuff was missing in Syria, so they were carrying it on their backs without a car. Really little amount of aid that I saw while I was at that border, hung out for a bit. Ingrid, you went to the border recently, right?
Yeah, I went to another border crosser, the Bab al Hawa border crossing close to Reyhanlı. Initially, I went there because there's quite some Syrian refugees that are going back to Syria after the earthquakes. I mean, Antakya especially, but also there around, there's many Syrian refugees living there that already, like once before, lost everything, had to move to another place. And for them, for many of them, once they went to the border, they have now the government has issued a special permit or a special regulation that allows them to go back to Syria for up to 6 months, and then they maintain their temporary protection status in Turkey. I mean, for them, it's always free to go back to Syria, but then they can't come back with the same regulations that apply to them now. So I spoke to quite some of them about the reasons that they would go back now. I mean, for many, it was just an addition to already, I mean, they already living under difficult circumstances. There's lots of discrimination against Syrian refugees that was only fueled by politicians that blamed Syrians for looting and other kind of bad comments, let's say it like it. But many of them actually wanted to come back. They said, we're just gonna keep waiting there for like a little bit, visit our families, stay with our relatives. And then they were they had an intention to come back. And it's also normally with Ramadan, a lot of Syrians are temporarily going back to Syria. Last year, that was forbidden by the authorities. But I mean, so it was for some of them, it was temporarily. Others say like we already lost here everything, so we will go back for good. In terms of humanitarian aid, there was a long line of trucks going to Syria, but I was told it was just normal, actually normal export, and not so many humanitarian trucks. There is the most of the humanitarian aid is going from the Rehanlı border crossing, but I couldn't. I mean, I haven't been there before actually, so I couldn't tell if it's more than normally. But there was a huge line of. I mean, I don't know how long, but many trucks going there. Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, just spoke with an NGO friend just before we started about ask the same question to him, and like about are there any things that people can do about like increase the aid to the northern Syria. Like he says that there are some regular things that we can say that like just voice the issue and try to increase the funding and etc. But actually, like there is an elephant in the room, and which is that it's still a war zone, and there are different political actors, which makes international aid way more difficult than to another like country. Like people and the international actors like who are now in the area, they are just trying to like create a very like delicate plan to not to upset anyone politically and not to create any chaos. So it makes things and the aid delivery very slow actually. And like as Ingrid said, we noticed that like in the first week of the disaster, almost no help went to Syria, and the first help that arrived to the region were actually like the pre-arranged ones, even not the earthquake aid. So like the aid started to reach Syria very late, and now we can see that it's like slowly decreasing again.
And then we got a lot of questions on just journalism and media coverage and restrictions following the earthquakes. And, you know, actually Sözlük blocking that. Maybe Selim, you want to comment on that? On a more general situation where, like, does restricting media access and these controls have its intended effects? Is the government achieving its aims by blocking sites like Ekşi Sözlük following a major disaster? And then Twitter immediately after the earthquakes, or a few days after.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were also panicking in the initial days of the earthquake. They came to realize that it took them a while, I think, to realize that this wasn't going to work out for them politically, and they tried to control the message much more forcefully, especially after the second day. I don't think it worked very well, because social media at this point isn't really something you can control very much. I mean, yes, the political types usually are on Twitter, right? But there's so much more now. You can't control WhatsApp, obviously, because it's closed loop, but it's a big messaging service. You can't control TikTok. It's way too complicated, right? Facebook, I think, is a mixed bag, but I don't think it's as influential anymore anyways. So Ekşi Sözlük was in many ways low-hanging fruit, I think. And also, what I think was important about Ekşi Sözlük is that, well, it's a Turkish social media site, right? It's very old in terms of social media, and it feels, I think, more real than some of the more refined social media channels. You know, Ekşi Sözlük, for those who don't know, it's literally means sour, a sour dictionary. Yeah, that's the. So what it does is it sort of takes on keywords. Like, think of it as a hashtag system for the internet. And then if you have an account, you get to go in and write something about that particular sort of hashtag or that particular topic, right? So if it's something like, earthquake in Hatay, right? You can go in and type like what you think of the earthquake in Hatay, basically, right? And you can't really have an account unless you're invited. I think, has that system changed? I don't think that system has changed yet. It's just become easier to get invited. There was a whole issue at some point, I think in 2015 it was, that the government actually made them compromise on their policy. Because before it was pretty anti-government, and the government made them compromise. Anyways, Ekşi feels a lot more national and up close. It feels more authentic, I think, than something like Twitter, where you can see lots of robots and whatnot. So what happened, what people say triggered the Ekşi ban was this military officer. I think he was an officer. He was in his 40s. He was an officer, I'm pretty sure. He witnessed, he was in Hatay during the earthquake, and apparently he witnessed a lot of really terrible things. And he went on Ekşi and wrote about it in great detail. So I've read, the things he wrote and the way in which he wrote them and that sort of thing, which made me think that it's probably authentic, and B, it was deeply problematic for the government, right? Because it's, somebody like that, especially in an official position, writing about a disaster in a very intimate way. I could see how that would be A, politically compromising for the government, and B, very difficult to control. So they did what they usually do, which is just to shut it down. I think it's back up now, but it's controlled. Right, Ekşi is easy to control because it's not some big, very rich company out in the United States. It's based here, so they can make it do things they can't with other companies. So I think they're quite happy with the way Twitter is now responding to their request under the new ownership of Elon Musk.
Yeah. Anyone want to add any underground or overall media journalism comments? No, I mean, I can say just from going around taking photos, yesterday I got stopped 5 times by security officials. It took about an hour and a half out of my day. They just ran my information, my card. I think that there's a lot of security in Antakya and Samandağ, as I saw, because there were these allegations of looting, some of which did occur, but then, social media amplifies certain things. Like if one group of looters can be seen in multiple parts of a neighborhood, and then we think there's a million looters, and it can cause some kind of panic. So it was good to see security officials taking care of things. What they were doing, was mostly sitting and watching their phones. So that when they see a journalist walk by, they ask for credentials so that they're doing their job, is the way I see it. Just to tell their boss that they checked someone. It's a quota system, right? I would just mention that it's been pretty easy to get credentials to go to the earthquake zone, at least initially. We'll have to see how that changes over time. But right now, it seems like İletişim, the communications directorate, is generally very permissive for people that want to cover the area. But then there's individuals on the ground, specific officers that want to display their power or show that they're working, and will interfere with you and tell you can't walk on a certain street, and it's just their decision. And then you can make a problem, or you can just walk a different direction. And usually I don't want to waste my time, so I walk in another direction. That was my experience. Anything else?
And I think like we were always talking about the lack of reporters in Turkish media even before the disaster. But like when we were talking about it, all seemed so like hypothetical to a lot of people. But when we like faced with the disaster, actually that problem in the Turkish media showed itself more, because there were a lot of like disinformation, like non-quality journalism. So like besides of governments like trying to ban some like part of media or etc., like actually the current like situation of the media also like blocked its like ability to like deliver quality stories actually.
Yeah. Do we have an opposition candidate yet? Can we still talk about the earthquake? We don't have any announcements, right? So we're getting some questions about what families are doing specifically to find missing people. Does anyone have information on that other than posting their images on missing posters and writing a phone number? Is there any specific groups that are collecting or organizing search for missing people?
Müge Anlı and Ahbap collecting some information still about the lost ones, and one can always go to the like lost bodies cemetery, and there is a process of like they're checking the fingerprints, then they're taking some DNA samples, and there is also like digital photo book which involves every person's like photos in that day that died in Hatay. They do not have any like grouping system. If you want to like give it a try to find your loved one's body, you need to like check every photos that they are putting in there, and most of them are not actually very easy things to see. Besides of that, you can always like when you ask to the ministry, they said that one should call the hospitals, but we tried several hospitals last week and they do not have a central system yet still. Like you can only just do like call Adana Devlet Hastanesi and ask there if your loved one is there or not, and then you should like try the next hospital because they don't have a central system. That's the situation as far as I know right now still.
Okay. What about reconstruction? Erdogan promised to rebuild some of the most damaged areas within a year, rebuilding more than 200,000 buildings, I think was the last statement. This might help his election campaign to have some photo ops, some ribbon cutting ceremonies in front of foundations being laid for new apartments for people that are displaced, many of who are in camps or elsewhere with relatives. I watched another webinar recently by the Ottoman History Society. I can link to it in the show note. But one of the experts on these topics, which I'm not, said that it was problematic to lay foundations for buildings so quickly, because as anybody who's been to the area knows, there's still aftershocks, and to lay concrete while there's tremors every day can risk creating maladjusted buildings. How do you say crooked buildings? You have foundations that are not laid correctly. Basically, the concrete doesn't settle in a way that would be sound. And then we have a repetition of the problem that we just saw on February 6th, and then on also before that, 1999, and it continues. So what do we think about reconstruction prospects, what it means politically, and what the opposition can do at this point? Anybody want to cover any of these topics?
I can briefly speak to that. I mean, yeah, politically, it was very important for him to be able to say 1 year and will get to work right away because I think of the election. He's got no time. The earthquake, I think, was very bad for them politically. They needed to be able to say something very quickly to sort of make the pain go away. They thought, if you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. This is what they can do really well. Construction, very fast, right? They're good at fast construction. So they figured, okay, if we do this, if we do it super fast, people will be impressed. Maybe some people will be, I don't know. But I don't think it'll make all that big of a difference. And in terms of, there was something else I was going to say. In terms of construction quality as well, I think there'll be, I was reading this, I was reading this, it actually came out, I think, February 5th. It was in the New York Times, this piece by Ezra Klein about how in most Western countries, construction costs have gone up in the recent decades, actually. If you look at how much you can build for $1, right, for your money, technology has gone up, right? But the construction cost more or less remains the same for a unit of building, right? It's even become much more complex. So when you look at countries like the UK, when you look at the United States or Western Europe particularly, it's very difficult to build things. It takes a long time. And that's not because people are worse at building buildings. They're actually better at building buildings. But building things has just become much more bureaucratic. It's become much more about, people's safety. There's all these things about how, if you work construction, you have to, by law, you have to warm up first before you get to work, right? So there's all these people doing jumping jacks for 10 minutes before they get to work. Why? Because it's better for their backs or something, right? All these regulations, right? Red tape, as they call it. It's actually makes everything more painful, but at the same time, it makes buildings a lot safer, and it makes construction less destructive in many ways, right? But their attitude about we're going to build everything in a year, it shows that the same problem basically persists. I mean, yes, they might build things in a way that might be earthquake proof, right? That might be situated in places where earthquakes aren't a big problem, but they're not going to fix the underlying problem, which isn't just unsafe buildings. It's a structure, it's a system that doesn't really value human life the way it should, right? I think that's what that shows. So the problem is going to persist. It won't be an earthquake, but it'll be something else. It'll be a drought or what have you. There'll be other sort of difficulties that the system creates, I think.
Anyone want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also like when I work for my newspaper, they're also asking, how it's gonna look like, did reconstruction already starts? I mean, first of all, there's still a huge amount of rubble that needs to be cleaned. I mean, the Renaissance building was cleaned, but it's the exception. You see like rubble everywhere, and I mean, especially on Tokyol, I think it will still take a long time. And it's not only the rubble. I mean, there's many buildings that will need to be destroyed and need to be rebuilt. And I think also I visited with a group of lawyers. We visited a small village. Where I think most of the buildings, they were built by people themselves without the proper licenses, without the proper, the things you need for building a building. Most of it didn't have it, and it's just like a family. They start building a house, they get larger, they build on top of that, they invite other family members to live with them. Then their house gets, they say it's either damaged, or you say orta hasarlı or ağır hasarlı, the medium and higher level of damage. And but it's also, when there's a whole family living in this building, it will not, if they will get a new house, if they will be eligible for instance, a Tokyol building. Also, we have a candidate. Let me just finish this quickly, and then we can talk about the candidate probably. But for many of them, it was real worry. What would happen if they would make a similar amnesty that they made in 1995 with 1999 with certain of these cases, and if they would have to move in a 1+1 Tokyol apartment building in a city, or if they could continue living in their village. So I think there's also, there's many different kind of situations in the rebuilding process.
Yeah, so as expected, with a lot more drama, Kılıçdaroğlu is the candidate. Just announced. Let's see. So, should we move to what just happened with Akşener? Because I was in the earthquake zone, and I would appreciate a concise summary of what we just experienced, whether it was necessary. Is this some kind of bargaining trick that works to create more leverage? What just happened? Anybody want to take that on?
I'll do that, if you like. So what just happened? As I said, Akşener stormed off. It was weird because, well, dude, if we expect here, we most people here will have followed Turkish politics more or less, and will know what's been happening in the past few months. But there's a table of 6 where the main opposition, let's say, parties have gathered. The big parties are the CHP and İYİ Party, the good party. And then there's some smaller right-wing parties, but really it's the CHP and İYİ Party. What happened was that İYİ Party wanted one of the mayors, Ankara's mayor or Istanbul's mayor, to be the candidate for the presidency, right? And what the CHP did, and what Kılıçdaroğlu specifically did, was sort of to say, okay, we'll talk about the candidacy later, okay? We'll talk about it later. Then all the while, he was putting himself forward, and he was making sure that the mayors would be in the sort of in the background, wouldn't be standing out too much. And the İYİ Party people really hated that. They really hated it. It was like a pressure cooker, that party. You talk to anybody from there, they were like, we don't understand, because for them, really, they felt like, okay, because to a lot of, especially sort of center-right minded voters or people in Turkey, politics is really about PR, right? It's not really about, especially the political candidate is very important, and it's about PR. It's about how you present yourself. It's not really about a vision for the future per se. It's not about policies, really. The policies, you can call in the book smart people when the time comes, and you can tell them to do smart things, right? That's how you make policy. But politics is a completely different sphere for them. So they're saying, we have these 2 wildly popular candidates. who could run, they beat Erdogan no matter what, right? They were thinking, especially Yavaş, they were thinking, could beat Erdogan no matter what. He's way ahead in every single poll. Why don't we just run with this person, right? And that pressure built up over time. And then Kılıçdaroğlu's strategy was always to say, okay, like 2 months before the election, he was going to tell İYİ Party, okay, I'm the candidate, deal with it, right? No more discussion. That's it. That was kind of, and he thought that would be a way of dealing with the pressure. It turned out to be not so great of a way of dealing with pressure because the thing exploded. We had this really harshly worded statement from Akşener. A lot of people were talking about, why did she word it that way? She could have just said, okay, we haven't been able to reach an agreement. I'm sorry, guys. I'm leaving the table of six. That would have been fine, right? That would have done the job, and then that would have actually put pressure on the CHP. The way she left it was, the way she talked about it was sort of offensive to CHP people, and it also made it easier for Kılıçdaroğlu to hold his ground, right? Because giving in to her would have been way too much of a concession. But it appears that it was sort of a last-minute decision, because she came back now saying that, because I think what they deliberated over the weekend was, could Akşener run as a presidential candidate? And I think they decided she couldn't. It wasn't viable. So today they've come up with this new formula that I talked about. Yeah, that seems to be.
Is there anything?
Seems to make people happy. Yeah.
Is there anything we can say about the timing? I mean, if she wasn't happy with Kılıçdaroğlu as a candidate, why wait until now? I'm guessing they discussed who would be the candidate before last week.
Yeah, I mean, they. I don't think İYİ Party is all that much to blame on the timing, to be honest. They are to blame on a lot of things, but not on that, because the CHP Kılıçdaroğlu structured it, I think, in this way specifically, for it to be a last-minute thing, and for him to have his say without too much of a debate. He didn't want all that much of a debate, because, it was very awkward all the while. You had the table of six gathering and talking about all these, what people thought relatively boring and minor topics like, policy, right? And they didn't talk about the one big issue that was on everybody's mind, which was, who's going to be the candidate. That's what anybody, for the past few months, that's what everybody wanted to know. And they, on purpose, sort of, procrastinated on that point.
Gonca, Ingrid, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I don't want to act like that, like the earthquake and the disaster that happened like in this country should always be on our focus and etc. But on the other hand, I think that's the way that we should follow. And basically, like tens of thousands of people still in the region just like wait something from someone, like from officials or the opposition leaders, that like people just lost their lives, and like they're like not just died, and they didn't just lost their relatives, they just lost their sense of normality, and they don't have like homes, jobs, anything right now. And like for me, actually, of course, like as journalists and like the people who are into this region, we will follow those updates. But I'm actually like kind of done with this like joint candidate thing, and like and I believe like the opposition should come up with like some solid plans instead of doing the same old like candidacy and the power discussion between like their like actors. So like not a journalistic opinion, but personally that's how I feel about the recent discussions actually.
Yeah, I mean, it is an anniversary, or the 1 month mark of the earthquakes. Interesting date to announce your candidacy. You could have picked another date, but just my thoughts. What about mixing the two topics? Kılıçdaroğlu was initially praised by some of his supporters for his criticism of Erdogan directly after the earthquakes. He had some videos where he said this was all the fault of Erdogan and his policies. And some people said he was acting very swiftly, making some good political statements in the immediate aftermath of the earthquake. Now that he's the candidate, can he use some of that momentum to bring people to the ballot box and vote for him? How do we see Kılıçdaroğlu's earthquake response and his candidacy? Any comments on this?
Sure, I can take that. What was interesting, I think, with the earthquake is that you saw different initial reactions from everybody, from all the political leaders. Erdogan usually sort of disappears, and I think that's understandable. You know, if you're running the country, you have a lot to do at that point. On the second day, it became pretty political, and Kılıçdaroğlu and Akşener had very different reactions, and that was, I think, noted by a lot of people. Akşener said, her statement was, "It's the time for us now to be quiet and for the state's voice to be heard." The state being the government. Basically, she had nothing political to say, is what she was saying. And Kılıçdaroğlu had the exact opposite reaction. He was very angry. He traveled to the region immediately and recorded videos and published those videos over social media. And then I think that the defining remark he made was, the old Kılıçdaroğlu is no more, I'm now new. And he really wanted to harness a new kind of anger. He wanted to channel a new kind of anger against the government, which we weren't used to seeing. We weren't used to seeing him being that decisive and that sort of that angry, channeling that anger. You know, Erdogan used to say that anger was a rhetorical art. Anger itself, the channeling of that emotion, was a rhetorical art. And Erdogan made his career, of course, on channeling anger. And that sort of thing is what we're seeing now, I think. Again, this campaign is going to have to be about channeling a lot of anger, but doing it in a controlled way. So I think that's what Kılıçdaroğlu is gearing up for.
Anyone else?
I think when we remember that Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu did a walking between Ankara and Istanbul 6 years ago, I believe, and his walk ended up with 1 million people actually. But what happened next was even though victories in Ankara and Istanbul followed that event, CHP didn't manage to actually be more active about that much of people. So, and then recent times we're seeing that Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu is having a agenda, and he did those institute visits, and he was very reactive on social media and etc. On those terms, I think his report card seems hopeful for the future campaign, but I'm actually don't want to upset anyone, but not sure if the CHP of other CHP officials or the members of the party would be able to like just expand his words and create a political campaign, or like give people those answers that they are needing in like both in the disaster region and on the other sides, because like people in Istanbul, they are in fear of their lives also, like people in other Turkish cities, people are demanding some answers. So if like him and his team will be able to like manage to give answer those like questions and demands, I think it will like define the fate of the elections that we are going to face.
Yeah, I think if I can jump in, I think what Gonca is saying is very important. Electorally, I mean, people ask, I think we've got somebody asking about voting in the affected areas. You know, there's going to be voting in the affected areas. I don't know about the mechanics, but if we're thinking about the electoral dimension of the earthquake, it's not just, you know, people in the earthquake zone voting for or against Erdogan. It's about how people feel across the country, because most people in Turkey live in earthquake zones, right? And a lot of people are now thinking about, you know, where their families are living and the buildings they live in, and are those safe? I mean, here in Ankara, it's not a big deal. My entire family lives in Izmir. We're from Izmir, and I was talking to my mom, and she was saying, "Oh, you know, all these buildings, are they going to collapse now? What are we going to do?" Like, people have these mental images, these daydreams about what they would do in the event of an earthquake. And I have relatives who are very pro-AK Party and still vote for Erdogan, and you know, I heard them say as well, like, they're not so sure that something that was very solid before February 6th no longer is, I think. And that, you know, that doesn't express itself right away, but I think that there is that very a very deep shift happening.
Yeah, just logistically, how to vote in the affected areas. The people in Hatay area, where I was over the weekend, seem to be in the ones that are in organized camps, the camps are very organized, and that can be a container camp or a camp in the city square. Each city has like a central plaza, and there's a camp there, and there's officials, there's security. I imagine they could be organized if the government wants to organize them. I think the government can take that initiative. The question is about all the others that are not in organized camps, and what to do with them, and how to move them, and you know, make that process happen. Beyond that, I don't know. I don't want to speculate. But on how a lot of people are asking how the earthquake is going to impact the elections. To make it more specific, I would ask maybe Ingrid, since she was talking to the most people most recently in the earthquake zone. What were people saying about the earthquake and their political impressions? Did you hear anybody change their opinions about the parties they supported before the earthquakes? How were they reasoning it with themselves, or was politics not even on their minds? What did you see?
Yeah, so what I'm immediately thinking about was, I think the third day after the earthquake, when I went to Kahramanmaraş, or Maraş as most people call it. It was like quite early. I mean, there were the search and rescue operations were still ongoing, and there was a very, very emotional environment. I mean, there were hundreds of people waiting for, the search and rescue operations to reach their loved ones. And we talked to some younger people living in Gaziantep, but were from the region, and they said like they would really be looking at how Maraş is changing, because there is an AKP mayor. It's majority AKP conservative traditional area, and there was a lot of anger at the government. They were saying the state was late. Where were they? We were left on their own. But I think as now time is, we are like 1 month further, and I didn't see that real anger, that emotional anger so much. I mean, of course, it's still there. But what I've also been seeing is, people really supporting the government. I mean, being so angry that there is speculation about what the government's role is. I mean, we see it. I mean, I got kind of like, there were some, what you see when foreign media is there asking these kind of questions, that there was a huge kind of argument, and they wanted to step in. They wanted me to step in to get these foreigners out. It's like, I mean, I'm not gonna do that, but you saw there was like also really emotional conversation between people. What I mean, we see in those street reportage kind of videos, and also I think what also will matters. I mean, there's also a lot of people that believe this is all. I mean, I don't know how many, but quite some people that were kind of saying this. That were thanking the state for all they were doing. They also immediately added some kind of comments that it was all an act of God, and that the state or something, they didn't have anything to do with it. It was so big that it was all in the hands of God. So it was supposed to be like this. That might also influence how they are seeing this, connected to politics or not. And just some recent what we saw in this container village that was built by Kalyon, one of the 5 big construction sites. So I mean, these people were also really thankful of the government. The government was very present in this camp, and they said, like, we got everything for free from them, etc. So that initial kind of, I mean, they were complaining that they were left on their own for 2 days as well. But then this initial response, I'm not sure if they had this, if it changed anything, but at least to us, at least they voiced actually, they were thankful of the government of supplying this. So that can, with these, with infrastructure or the means the government has, providing an initial relief might be changing, even though it's, of course, not still, they live in containers, but compared to the, really terrible situation in the tent, at least it was some kind of an improvement that they think, that they appreciated the government for.
Anyone want to add?
Yeah, I just had like very similar like experiences as Ingrid during the first few days, actually. Like, I know that when people have their own criticism against the government, it is like easy to expect that like the situation creates a big backlash against the officials or the current administration. But like during the day 2, it was our first day in Antakya as BBC team, and we were like recording a group of men actually who were trying to like reach to their loved ones under the rubble with just basically like pickaxes and etc. And then like for a brief moment they thought that they found someone alive, but then like we just learned that those 2 people were dead. And they were very open to us and they were sharing everything. But one point, like when the hope went and the sorrow came, they just started to say that we shouldn't report that the government was not there. And they said like it came from God and our government is trying to do everything. And like just to report, like during that moment, there were basically almost no officials in Antakya, no international or national aid. There were just like a couple of volunteers, like in order to show that like how was the situation. It only took us like 3 hours from Adana to reach Hatay. So there were no like trucks on the roads, no rescue teams on the roads. So like that family had no one to help them, and they were just trying to like remove their loved ones by bare hands, but they weren't like angry against the government. They basically actually like tried to like protect government from our team, since we were a foreign media team, but like that was the situation. So, and also like some recent studies that we referenced, one of them like in our latest edition also, like done by team research. So it also shows that what happens like increase the anger and like loss of hope a little bit in the supporters of like government supporter voters, but it didn't actually like create a big difference in their voting preferences.
Mm. Yeah, I from my personal chats with people in the earthquake region, from Adıyaman to Hatay and Adana, I did not see many conversions, people going against their previous political party or group. I saw a lot of people just, reasoning in ways that allowed them to continue supporting the parties that they already supported. I think Ingrid and I spoke to one woman in a container camp who said, yeah, aid didn't come to us for the first few days, but there were, the aid was going to other cities. What could they do? So, people look at life and reason in ways that, their belief system can work. And they do that for the earthquake as well. So whether or not this will have big impacts on the elections and the voter turnout, we'll have to see. But yeah, I did not see conversions as a result of the earthquake. Obviously, it was a very emotional period. We're in the last 10 minutes, 9 minutes to go. I wanted to start wrapping up, or to wrap up with one more question looking forward. Basically, what can we expect in the months to come before the elections? We got a little more than 2 months. And also, is there anything that you would advise people to keep an eye out? And would you advise people to keep an eye out for something? Personally, I think the news about Saudi Arabia confirming the $5 billion swap, I think it was today. I was on a plane, so excuse me if it's not a swap. But foreign money coming to Turkey right now, also from UAE possibly, this weighs on the campaign in different ways for Erdogan. And I note this because Erdogan can receive foreign funding, but I spoke to Western officials who are very hesitant to, support in any way the opposition, because then they would be labeled in all sorts of ways by Turkish media. So Erdogan can benefit from foreign support, while the opposition is a bit more tricky to get that support. And we know that money wins elections, campaigns, messaging. Obviously, people have their preferences, but I would keep an eye on this dynamic. And also, just today, I think was a remarkable, it's just a remarkable example of how the Turkey news cycle and how many events happen in such limited time, in such a short amount of time. Basically, we have to move on. We can't reflect on what the earthquake means, on the construction codes. Now we have to talk about the elections, the politics, and then nothing gets fixed is, a likely result. So because of the speed and the chaos, sometimes, I see it as an enemy of progress and, fixing issues that remain, because you just have to stay on the treadmill many times living here. And I feel many residents probably share this feeling of being on a treadmill and just trying to keep up, or they just unplug, which is a completely reasonable thing to do. So looking forward, Anybody want to talk about what to expect or what to keep an eye out for?
I can start. I think that this coming election now. Well, first of all, until the SEK, the Supreme Electoral Body, has spoken on the election, there's still the possibility of the elections being postponed. It looks like it's getting more and more dangerous for the government. So it would not be an unreasonable thing for them to try to do. But the thing is that this election has been expected for quite some time. For at least 2 years, I think people were really looking forward to the election. A lot of people were thinking about the election, daydreaming about the election. So there's going to be, and now I think that the opposition has this sort of, it aired up its fight, it aired up its differences and was able to reconcile them. There's probably going to be renewed energy. And I don't think the earthquake is going to go away at all. I think it's going to maintain its place in the news cycle. Because I mean, there's so many people affected. Tens of, close to 20 million people directly affected. Everybody has loved ones or relatives, somebody who's in the area. So I don't think it's going to go away. It's just going to feed into the electoral cycle and going to be an electoral issue. So yeah, it's just going to get more and more dangerous, I think, for the government. Which means that it's going to be dangerous for everybody, I think. Transition is never easy.
Next. Ingrid.
Yeah, so I mean, like what I've seen in the past 2 weeks, past week and 2 weeks before, I think also looking forward is what one guy told me in the camp, that he said, like, for now, right now, we get everything for free. We get meals, we can get all these services. Everything is free. But I mean, at some point, yeah, until when is that possible? Until when can that be sustainable? That was like something that he really was afraid of. And I think that's also a question, is how long is this going to be like the emergency mode, when there's like all these volunteers, NGOs, also people helping each other with donations, sending stuff to the earthquake zone. I mean, the economic situation is kind of like been a little bit not forgotten, of course, but it's not been as in the forefront of like when it was before the earthquake. So I mean, at some point, you can't deny that reality anymore, and maybe people don't have the means to donate or to help family members financially. So I think that's also a real concern. If the money, like the 10,000 lira initially, I not, and then later it was, it was more. Anyways, if that money runs out, what will these people do? I mean, will there be more economic support packages? Will they get some kind of other support? So I think that's also something to look forward to after the initial emergency relief support coming from everywhere. I mean, of course, there's a lot of money donated from abroad, but in what kind of way will that feed into I mean, the situation on the ground, how will that play out? Will that, I mean, be sustainable for a longer time? I think those are just questions that I have for the coming weeks, months, years from now.
And Gonca, to finish.
Yeah, like when we look at the scale of what happened, like we are talking about millions of people basically who are dislocated and now living in like new cities, new setups, like with new conditions. They have no jobs, like they do not know where to send their children for school. So like, don't want to be pessimistic, but with the current situation of the economy in the country, that like first month was like kind of hopeful with all of the actually like the missing things and with all of the problems, but it was still hopeful because people were trying to do something. But like we all know that it's going to increase because of the real conditions of the life. So we really need a like long-term plan to how to like rebuild lives in those cities and how we build like lives for people who are now displaced, because like don't want to compare it to like separate things together, but actually like we can see some early signs of the situation, what happened with the millions of Syrians in the country. Actually, like those people arrived more than 10 years ago, and Turkey was like still experiencing integration problems with those communities. So like with the new displaced population, we are basically like almost sure that like our country will like experience more problems. But like in order to like report on this process or like learn more about this, like what will going to happen and explain, because we believe that in order to people like the large amount of like people to ask good questions and like keep people like responsible for situations, they need to know what happened and what was the reasons behind it. So like as Turkey recap is like, even though it sounds pessimistic, like we are going to keep doing our best to cover this like future months and like probably at least a year. So like don't want to sound like a promoter, but like in this road we really need your like our readers and the others' help. So hope we can manage it, hope we can like keep asking like the right questions and inform people and do our jobs. And we are almost sure and determined to do that. But like, yeah, it's not going to be an easy thing, not just for us. It's not going to be an easy process for all like all the country and also the neighboring Syria, actually.
Yeah. Well, thank you everyone for joining. This is the first time we've done anything like this. And I hope it was useful. I hope that it guides your thoughts, conversations in the future. Be happy to do it again. If anybody has requests, email us, info@turkeyrecap.com. And yeah, we look forward to continuing this process, and have a good evening. May the election season treat you well. Good evening.
Thanks everyone for watching and asking questions.
Bye.